Welcome, everyone. Today, we're diving into the radical philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche. We'll explore one of his most provocative works, Beyond Good and Evil, and see how he challenges traditional ideas about morality, religion, and life itself. So, let's get started. Before we dive into his ideas, let's talk about Nietzsche himself. He was born in 1844 in Germany and raised in a very religious household. Despite these, Nietzsche became one of the fiercest critics of religion, particularly Christianity. He started his academic journey at the University of Bonn and Leipzig, and by the age of 24, he was already a professor of philosophy. Nietzsche is famous for works like The Spoke Zarathustra, The Will to Power, and of course, Beyond Good and Evil. Although he wasn't widely appreciated in the English speaking world during that time, Nietzsche's ideas spread through Germany and France. Many philosophers, psychologists, and writers were influenced by him. Beyond Good and Evil was published in 1886 and is a powerful critique of morality and modern philosophy. In this book, Nietzsche argues against the idea of absolute truth and the traditional binary thinking of good versus evil. He invites us to think beyond these boundaries. One of his most famous quotes, which I'm sure you've heard before, is he who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster. So, what does Nietzsche have against traditional morality? Well, for starters, he found it boring. He believed that traditional moral philosophy stifled human creativity and potential. He criticized moralists for lacking originality and making virtue seem unappealing. He made the point that morality should inspire and challenge and not stifle human potential. Nietzsche actually thought that a little mischief was a good thing. He believed that people should add a bit of playfulness and mischief to their lives instead of blindly following moral rules. He saw morality as something that should inspire, not suppress, human potential. Who doesn't like a little harmless trouble, right?
Now we have one of Nietzsche's most important idea, which is the will to power. Nietzsche describes life as fundamentally involving appropriation, conquest, and exploitation. He argues that these actions should not be viewed negatively as they are a natural part of life. He gives healthy aristocracies as an example, where individuals are equals within the group. However, there is still a need to engage with competition outside the group in order to stay relevant. This is driven by the will to power, the driving force behind all life. Nietzsche believed that life isn't just about staying alive, it's about seeking growth and control. He saw this need for power as something natural that pushes people to innovate and improve themselves. The will to power fuels one's need to strive for more growth, more control, and more power. According to Nietzsche, exploitation is not a negative or a derogatory term, but rather a necessary aspect of life that is a consequence of the will to power. He says that these struggles, which people often think of as harmful or unfair, are actually necessary for growth. Without them, there wouldn't be any motivation for societies or individuals to push themselves further. Exploitation is simply part of how our life works. Nietzsche introduces the two main types of morality, master morality and slave morality. He believed that morality is not universal, but is something that is shaped by specific social conditions. The roles people play in society shape their moral beliefs. For example, master morality originates from the ruling class, while slave morality originates from the oppressed. We can differentiate these two by the morals that they value. Master morality values strength, nobility, and gaining dominance and power. Slave morality, on the other hand, values humility, kindness, and patience, and is more focused on the experiences of the people. Let us now go more into the details of these moralities. First, we have master morality. Master morality represents the values of the strong and powerful, often found in aristocratic societies. This is where the antithesis good and bad practically means the same as noble and despicable. Good is associated with power, strength, and superiority. The bad are those who are weak, timid, or insignificant. Here, Nietzsche argues that moral values, such as good or bad, were first used to describe men and not actions, and calls it a gross mistake when historians start with questions that focus on actions being praised. An example of master morality is when aristocrats look down on those they consider beneath them. They see themselves as the determiner or the creator of values. They don't seek approval from others, they dictate what is right based on their own experiences. The quote, "We are the truthful ones," shows this attitude. Nietzsche further explains that the noble man honors power and whatever he sees in himself. He helps others not out of pity, but as a way to show his power. The noble man honors strength and rejects qualities such as sympathy and selflessness, as he sees these as weaknesses. His morality values the hardness or the toughness of his heart, which he had developed early in his life. Men of master morality have a strong respect for tradition and base all their laws around it. Here, Nietzsche expresses his belief in seeing modern ideas. He sees them as ignoble, as they lack respect for these established traditions. On the other hand, slave morality arises from the oppressed, the suffering, and the powerless. It emphasizes values that alleviate suffering, such as sympathy, kindness, humility, and patience. Slave morality is essentially the morality of utility. It is the origin of the famous antithesis, good and evil. According to slave morality, evil is associated with power and dangerousness, while good is synonymous with being safe. Slave morality believes in the evil man arousing fear, while master morality believes in the good man arousing fear. In this morality, the good person may be seen as weak, stupid, and easily deceived, while the evil person may be seen as strong and powerful and is viewed with fear. Everywhere that slave morality prevails, good and stupid essentially mean the same thing. To conclude, just remember that master morality focuses on the powerful, while slave morality focuses more on the oppressed.
What then alone can our teachings be? We have here the fatality of existence and lack of purpose. Nietzsche asserts that no external force, not even ourselves, gives man his qualities. We are not here striving toward an ideal morality or purpose because, for Nietzsche, purpose itself is an invented concept. We are part of fate, and nothing outside of existence can judge, measure, or condemn us. There is no higher purpose or ideal to aspire to. Next, we have the great deliverance and innocence of becoming. The realization that no one can be made responsible for existence and that there is no causa prima or first cause is what Nietzsche calls the great deliverance. This concept frees us from the notion of ultimate responsibility and judgment. It restores the innocence of becoming, allowing humanity to live without the burden of guilt or purpose imposed by external forces like God. As Nietzsche said, to live is to suffer, to survive is to find some meaning in the suffering. Moving forward to Christianity as the most fatal lie. According to Nietzsche, Christianity is the most dangerous and seductive lie ever told. It denies human strength and power, promoting values of meekness and self-denial. These values have infiltrated modern morality even when disguised. Nietzsche calls for an open declaration of war against Christianity, refusing any form of compromise with its ideals. Next, we have the degeneracy of morality. Nietzsche criticizes Christian morality for elevating the weak and ordinary as the standard for all humanity. This, he argues, is the most repugnant form of degeneracy that civilization has produced. Even today, ideals like humility and pity persist, hidden behind the name of God, holding back human potential and weakening society. Nietzsche's discomfort with the New Testament. When Nietzsche read the New Testament, he felt a deep discomfort. He was appalled by how the least qualified individuals claimed to understand and explain life's greatest problems. like the nature of existence and the purpose of life. Nietzsche considered this the most fatal form of insanity ever seen on earth, reducing complex existential issues to simple moral commandments. That's why we have the transvaluation of values. Nietzsche's solution is a complete transvaluation of values. He calls for replacing the Christian virtues of humility, pity, and self denial with values rooted in strength, ambition, and self assertion. He argues that Christianity, with commandments like love your enemy, has expelled natural morality and replaced it with ideals that weaken humanity's spirit. This, Nietzsche believes, is what must be overturned to allow for human flourishing. Law and moral idealism. Nietzsche explains that laws serve as realistic formulas for self-preservation within a community, forbidding actions that endanger its welfare. However, these laws do not forbid the attitudes from which these actions originate. Moral idealists go further, insisting that God sees into man's heart and that even the attitudes of mind must be eradicated. Nietzsche mocks this idea, noting that such beliefs only surface when a community has become so peaceful and it no longer requires war or self-defense to survive. Next, we have the Christianity and Judaism. Nietzsche argues that Christianity could only develop on the soil of Judaism. Among a people who had already renounced political life, the early Christian community, like the Jewish one, was unpolitical and existed in a parasitic relationship with the Roman government. However, Christianity went further than Judaism, encouraging men to emasculate themselves and embrace self-denial to an extreme degree. Moving on to the nature expelled from morality. In Christianity, the command to love ye your enemies replaces nature's primal law. Ye shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. This shift expels nature morality, replacing it with a morality that must be justified by the love of God. Nietzsche sees this as a denial of any natural basis for ethical behavior, transforming morality into something disconnected from human nature and survival instincts. Lastly, we have the emasculated ideal of man. Nietzsche asks why humanity is not repelled by the emasculated ideal of man that Christianity promotes. He suggests that over time, virtue has lost its natural masculine strength and has instead taken on a more feminine quality, which now appears sweeter and more appealing to people. Despite the dangers and hardships that come with many virtues, this softened ideal of goodness and purity has captivated the masses.
Ayan, so dumako naman tayo sa the astuteness of moral castration. So here, we have no violent physical means dahil spiritual war lang ang meron tayo. Ano nga ba ang spiritual war? So spiritual war are spells, roses, and lies. No physical means. Ayan, so according to Nietzsche kasi, there are 6 recipes for moral castration. These recipes are his list of arguments, not in a culinary sense, as in recipe, suka, toya, asukal, no. These recipes are his list of critics and arguments, again, of how traditional systems, particularly Christianity, suppresses and weakens human instincts. Nietzsche believes that this suppression leads to psychological and moral emasculation. Sinashape niya yung viewpoints natin psychologically and morally, where individuals lose their strength, creativity, and freedom to think independently and differently. So for the very first recipe states that one appropriates virtue in general and makes it the main feature of one's ideal. The older ideal is denied and declared to be the reverse of all ideals. Slander has to be carried to a fine art for this purpose. Yes, mahirap siya intindihan, but let me break it down for you. Nietzsche says that people take what they see as virtue, yung pinaka-applicable na virtue and moral, and they make it as the core of their beliefs. Then, they look at the old values, yung mga paniniwala nila before at pinaninindigan nila before. And because of this new value, new virtue, they reject their previous ones. Okay, so para magawa ito, you must be very skilled in slandering old values. Dapat marunong ka makilatis. Kung dapat ba siyang i-unlearn at i-reject. So, the first recipe highlights how new ideals overturn and discredit the previous ones we believe in. Okay, so the second recipe states that one's own type is set up as a general standard, and this is projected into all things, behind all things, and behind the destiny of all things as God. Into simpler terms, people take their own ideals, ayan, yung mga ideals nila, yung mga pinaniniwalaan, ayan, at sineset nila ito as the universal standard, as in sa lahat ng standard. They use it as a standard for everything. They then attribute these ideals to all things in the world, even to the entire universe. Ayan, so it says here that the opponents of one's ideal are declared to be the opponents of God. One arrogates to oneself a right to great pathos, the power, and the right to curse and to bless. The third recipe states. Ayan, so naranasan nyo na ba masabihan ng pagpalain ka ng Diyos sa ginagawa mo? Or papupunta ka sa impyerno sa ginagawa mo? I'm sorry for the word. But this recipe is saying kasi that if someone has ideals talaga, like strong ideals at paniniwala na nakalinya sa kanya religion or sa Biblia or kay God, then someone opposes it, then you are opposing the Bible and God and the religion as well. So, kaya naman, there are individuals, there are people na may kalayaan na magdesisyon kung, alam niyo yun, kung deserve mo ba ng blessing or punishment or malas. The fourth recipe says, all suffering, all gruesome, terrible, and fatal things are declared to be the results of opposition to one's ideal. All suffering is punishment, even in the case of one's adherents, except it to be a trial, and etc. This explains that yung mga taong hindi naniniwala sa Diyos o sa relihiyon na pinesify, o at saka sa salita ng relihiyon na yon, ay pinapunish sila to suffer. Kaya sila naghihirap, kaya sila milamalas, at maraming nangyayaring hindi kaaya-aya sa buhay nila. Bakit? Kasi nga, hindi naniniwala sa Diyos. Yun yung mga nagiging mindset. And ayun yung gustong i-point out ni Nietzsche. Kaya naman, itong mga belief na ito is used as something to reinforce na totoo ang Diyos at ang mga paniniwala na nakalain sa Kanya. Dahil nga, again, kapag hindi ka naniwala, puno ng kamalasan ang buhay mo. Yun yung parang pinoportray ng ating sentence. So, this is just an example, okay? The fifth recipe is, one goes so far to regard nature as the reverse of one's ideal, and the lengthy sojourn amid natural conditions is considered a great trial of patience, a sort of martyrdom. One studies contempt, both in one's attitudes and one's looks towards all natural things. So, this simply means that people with very strong beliefs, ayan, so they tend to disdain or dislike yung mga natural na nangyayari. Let me give you an example. Imagine a very religious individual migrated to a liberal country. Sa liberal na bansa, doon mo talaga makikita na maraming complex communities. So, what are complex communities, diba? So, ito yung community na iba't ibang tao makakasalimuha mo. Iba't ibang race, iba't ibang religion, iba't ibang paniniwala, paninindigan, pananaw sa buhay at yung kung paano sila magpalaki ng kanilang pamilya. Ayan, so natural lang yun. 'Di ba? Natural lang yun. Kaya nga humanity is very diverse, 'di ba? So, imagine this very religious individual. Yung paningin niya sa community na yun, sa complex community na yun, is a test of their faith, test of their patience. Para bang temptation lahat na nasa paligid niya. So, they view this kind of environment as parang battleground. Ayun yung gustong i-portray ng fifth recipe. And lastly, the sixth recipe. It tells here that the triumph of anti-naturalism and ideal castration, the triumph of the world, of the pure, good, sinless, and blessed, is projected into the future as the consummation, the finale, the great hope, and the coming of the kingdom of God. Nietzsche is telling us that if we reject natural instincts and the natural phenomenon around us, and we continue to be pure, to be good, to be sinless, to be blessed palagi, it will lead us to this future paradise or the kingdom of God, yun na pinaniniwalaan nga nila. Nietzsche criticizes ancient philosophers for lacking the courage to advocate for a non-free will, as such a theory would deny traditional morality. Nietzsche is saying that yung traditional morality na itinuturo ng mga psychologists before has molded the minds of the society. Hindi ba dapat yung mga psychologists, ito yung mga objective driven people, yung hindi sila nai-influence ng kanilang viewpoints. But then, Nietzsche laments how yung mga psychologists have been corrupted by moral idiosyncrasies because it impacted, again, and it weakened the freedom and the creativity of the people to think. Nietzsche argues that the entire history of moral evolution lacks truth. From past philosophical studies, which are Christian morality, Stoicism, utilitarianism, and Kantian ethics, led Nietzsche to believe that morality was a construct na nagpapahina sa pag-flourish ng pag-iisip at pagkilos ng mga tao. Bale, isa itong hindrance. Abstract virtue as seduction. Sino ba dito yung naranasan ng mag-seduce or maseduct? Ayan. So, natanong ko iyon dahil nga sabi ng ating philosopher na si Friedrich Nietzsche, he sees the abstraction of virtue as the highest seduction form. Isa siyang kaakit-akit na paniniwala na nagpapalapit sa mga tao. Dahil nga by turning their backs on the real world where natural things happen, these moralists have deceived and seduced others na mag-believe sa mga bagay na ito or sa mga paniniwala na ito. Alam niyo ba na Nietzsche actually admired sophists because they are the first ones to question moralist or traditional morality. Sophists believe that there are no moral standards and that talking about universal moral truths are pointless. Wala siyang hantungan, okay? Kasi ang paniniwala nga again ng mga sophists, walang moral standards. Alam nyo, personally, it is actually a challenge to digest Friedrich Nietzsche's words and this reading about beyond good and evil. But, alam nyo ba na this lays off a new and fresh perspective to all of us. Especially, we live in a country that is heavily influenced by morals. Especially me, I came from a Christian institution. And talaga nakakapanibago sa akin na, may pag-aaral pala na ganito. Sana, katulad namin, ay this lays off another perspective at bagong kaalaman din ito sa inyo. Dahil sobrang importante ng pag-aaral na ito. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to our RVP. Thank you so much for listening.